Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry about the short delay here getting started. We had a little bit of a technical issue getting the Zoom interface to work, but we're back on here now as we just wait for everybody to get on all the attendees coming in here. My name is Stuart Crawford, and I'm just going to be the technical guy behind the scenes. You shouldn't hear from me again after I finish talking. I'm going to flip it over to my colleague, Matt McKinnon, who's going to kickstart the festivities for this afternoon. Matt, why don't you take it away?
Hey, thanks, Stuart. Yeah, again, my name is Matt McKinnon with Forthright Technology Partners. Thank you for registering and attending our interactive webinar today. Real quick, Forthright, we're an IT consulting firm. We focus on a lot of end user computing type of projects. And the one big differentiator about Forthright, in my opinion, is our focus on the overall end user experience. And, you know, things have obviously changed. When COVID hit, you know, work from home has become the normal. Many companies we're finding are going to adopt remote access and work from home a lot more. And that obviously changes things, you know, going forward with all of us. So feel free to ask your questions. We want this to be really interactive. Or if you prefer just to listen in, that's cool too. Hey, John from Citrix, you want to introduce yourself?
So this is John Heller with Citrix, and I'm the regional director for the Southeast US for our commercial team. And it's great to be here. You know, fun to hear, Matt, your introduction. You know, so it's great to be here. Thanks for the introduction. You know, awesome partner with Forthright, and then, you know, IGEL, you know, working with the team in the field all the time. Great product suite there. And then Control Up, actually ran into them a lot when I was not only as a rep, but also as a leader here for Citrix. So it's great to be here. I think you guys know what we do. Lots of cool questions coming up. And I look forward to just hearing more about what you guys are doing and any questions and helping answer those. And we're proud to be a sponsor here. So if you guys need anything, feel free to call on me. As long as it's not too technical, I'm sure I can handle it.
Thanks, John. Barry, you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. So this is Barry Flanagan. I lead America Sales at Control Up. I appreciate Forthright for giving us this opportunity to speak to you all today. If you're not familiar with Control Up, we are a monitoring, troubleshooting, and remediation tool for Citrix. So we help customers optimize their user experience and do root cause analysis on their Citrix virtual apps and desktops. Our customers find a 30% or more reduction in monthly Citrix-related incidents and a 40% or more reduction in their mean time to resolve for Citrix incidents. So if you have some issues with some of the complexities of deploying applications, you know, Citrix does a great job, but when you start adding a bunch of business applications to it, that adds a lot of complexity. Control Up can help you with that to optimize user experience and do root cause analysis. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Kyle from IGEL, you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Matt, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think, you know, as the other said, you know, it's going to be a great event, and you know, thanks to Forthright for putting this on. But my name is Kyle Wilson. I am with IGEL. I'm the pre-sales engineer covering the Southeast for IGEL. We are in the thin client space. But we will lead with software. So our main play, right, is extending the life of endpoint hardware, so we can convert any, you know, x86 64-bit device and then turn it into essentially a you know, a thin client, for lack of a better term there, that you can manage, whether it's you know, across the internet or internally, you know, with your company. So looking forward to the event and the roundtable.
Great, thank you, Kyle. So we asked all of the attendees when you're registered, if you want to submit a question, and I have them listed here. A lot of great questions, by the way. And I first just wanted to say that, you know, end user computing, you know, isn't easy as it is. And then, you know, now with COVID, we've been in this for what, about 6 months now. And if you guys are like many other of our other customers and other organizations, the business told you, okay, guys, you have 2 weeks, or maybe it was a week to get everybody to work from home, go make it happen. So, you know, obviously we didn't have time to really prepare really strategized for a plan, and we're kind of getting by with what we have. And, obviously we're seeing a lot of performance issues out there with our customers. A lot of folks concerned around security. So you're not alone. I just want to, obviously, we're all in this together. And end user computing, it's not easy as it is. And then when you're told by the business, hey, make sure we have all the tools available for all our users to work from home in a quick span. So there'll be some prizes given away today. But with that, I just wanted to start by reading some of the questions that
I'm back on the call. I'm sorry, I have no idea what happened with my
no worries.
screen. So I don't know where we are with this. I apologize. Did everybody get introduced?
No worries. Yeah, so Kristen, this is Matt. We just did some introductions from our sponsors and some of the most strategic partners at Forthright.
Okay.
I guess, Kristen, do you want to just quickly just go over the agenda?
Sure. First, I wanted to say thank you to our sponsors. We have Grubhub gift cards that hopefully everyone received from Control Up and IGEL. So everyone hopefully got lunch today for free. And from Citrix provided 3 Amazon Echo shows to give out today. So we'll be giving those out throughout the hour. And then we can just kind of jump into the questions. If you have any follow-up, please use the chat functions, but we're just going to go through the questions that everyone supplied at registration, and then hope, discussion might go on from there and grow in more depth, but at least we're going to use the questions that everyone supplied as a guide to start the conversation. Yeah. But if you have any follow-up, please feel free to use the chat function. So do you want to dive right into the questions, Matt?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you. Mm-hmm. So Noah from Memorial Healthcare had an interesting question. Noah mentions, when it comes to supporting end user devices in a BYOD remote workforce, what lessons have you learned and what boundaries have to be established before you end up supporting their computer and not the worker? I thought that was a very interesting question. I used to work at Citrix, and I remember, so the Citrix had a BYOD plan, and what they did is they gave you a stipend, so you go out, purchase, a laptop, but they made you purchase support with it. John, I don't know if you want to chime in. I'm not sure if that's still the case today, but
yeah, same as today.
Yeah, but that's what Citrix is doing. I know a lot of other organizations do the same thing. I guess Steve from Forthright, do you want to chime in there? Some of the things we're seeing from our customers?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I think it's an interesting question because not all organizations choose to support the worker. Some are, as long as you can connect to the internet and reach your virtual desktop, at that point, we'll take it from there. What we've learned with COVID is not everybody was in a position to provide everybody with a device. And if you're doing BYOD, often you're using some device that you have in your house, and while it might connect to the internet, it could be loaded with spyware, malware, God knows what else. It could impact your user performance because even though you're connecting to a remote desktop or you're using a VPN, obviously that device that you're using, you're only as fast as your slowest point. So if you have issues there, you're gonna see that compound. I think at the end of the day, most of our customers that we've spoken to have been thrust into the requirement to actually support the worker, because the business needs all of its employees to be effective and efficient. And if their devices are not working at home, regardless of whether they're company owned or not, productivity suffers. And obviously, there's great technology we can use in the back end, but at the end of the day, if the device that the customer's in front of is having a problem, I don't know that you can completely get around that. Now, with that being said, now that we're months into this, many organizations, like Matt said, they're past all right, we need to get something working so you can work from home really quickly. A lot of the conversations we're having now are around how do we make it better? How do we improve the support, the ease of support, and how do we improve the end user experience? Leveraging technologies like IGEL where you can deploy terminals, you can use a UD Pocket, where you can boot a BYOD device into a clean, secure environment, which is really nice because at that point it doesn't matter what the end user has. That's a very nice function that you can use and tool set that you can use to make sure that you're not really supporting the end user, because at that point what they have is essentially isolated. And when they're done working, they can remove the USB out of the computer, reboot, and it goes back into their operating system. So that's a real interesting solution. I think the other issue that I've heard, and then I want to pass it over to Robert, I've seen customers that are very concerned about sending expensive devices, especially contact centers, out to remote locations because they have a higher turnover and they're used to controlling the asset. And that's another interesting use case for IGEL because you maintain the license on the back end, and that's your asset. The cost of the USB stick that's actually going out to your end user is very low, and that's an interesting option. And obviously, some people will choose Chromebooks or lower-end devices or even terminals that they can send up that are running Linux to keep the cost down of what you're actually sending out, because if that employee decides to leave or they need to be let go from the organization, you have a company asset out at that location. So those are some things that we've learned. As far as the boundaries, there's a lot of conversation there. What I'm going to do, just so we have other panelists have an opportunity to talk, I'm going to let Robert and Alan talk about, from a security standpoint, some of those concerns and the compliance ramifications of now people working from home. Robert, you want to go next?
Yeah, and Steve, I think that for sure when it comes to, especially on as users are moving to whether it's Citrix or RDS or Horizon, whatever it may be, a lot of dependency relies on the endpoints, and when you're moving to BYOD, you have obviously there's that challenge of having less control and consistency on all the endpoints that the users are using, and the impact of what's happening on the local machine that could definitely impact the overall user experience. So I think having a structure in place, and from our experience, as Steve was mentioning around the IGEL solution, to whether you're converting or just providing the plugin option to allow the user to connect in a more consistent way in a controlled environment, but still leverage their own personal machines separately. It allows you to kind of set those expectations, that the user may have, and not have to worry about the scenarios where, whether there's antivirus running on their local machine, or maybe they're doing some other stuff, or they're, the OS is corrupt, and all those kind of things can impact your overall experience. So I think it's definitely something that you want to plan ahead on. I know obviously with going into the COVID scenario, there wasn't a lot of options in terms of planning ahead, but moving forward, it's definitely a good solution to kind of have something like that.
Robert, maybe you can talk a little bit about some of our customers that ran the route of rolling out VPNs, and that was what they believed was the quickest and right. Best way to do this. And then of course that they ran into certain problems while doing that in the back end, and of course on the client side.
Yeah, the challenge is obviously the VPN, for one would be on the security side, and I'll let Alan kind of speak on to that portion. But, just beyond that, I mean, Citrix protocol, for example, is, already optimized to run in a sort of over the internet sort of solution without having to use VPN. So, you're kind of dependent on how well structured the VPN environment is set, how optimized that is, and you're not really gaining the benefit of when you're using a protocol like Citrix and the HDX sessions to kind of improve the overall user experience.
Alan, do you want to talk about some of the challenges from a security standpoint and the back-end concentrator challenges that you have when you increase the workload? What I've seen most of our customers typically plan, it would be interesting to get feedback on the chat. Most of our customers assume 20% of a remote workforce. And so obviously with COVID, all of a sudden you had 80 to 100% working remote. And a lot of the back-end infrastructure was not really designed from an architecture standpoint to handle that. Is Alan's on, right? That's interesting. Okay, I don't actually see Alan, so I will just speak for him. Obviously, I'm sure many of, if not everyone on this call, we're all related with IT, and we know the challenge of rolling out VPNs. What we've seen, obviously, is when you have customers bring in BYOD and then they use a VPN client on their device, whether it's physical or physical device or software. Obviously, at this point, you're giving them access to your network, and so anything that's running on that machine becomes a problem. There are tools that we can use and that we work with customers to lock down their device. But obviously, VPN is our least favorite way of connecting because of the security ramifications that it creates. And obviously, in the back end, you can control what servers and devices and networks it connects to. But there's a lot of propensity for human error that can occur. And now, of course, someone's machine that maybe one of their kids is doing something, or even sometimes we make mistakes, right, can infect the rest of the network and then all the other resources. We also had a lot of customers that had problems with the concentrators not having enough horsepower or licensing to handle the load. So it just slipped their mind. A lot of our school systems had that problem too, where you now have increased your user density, 5 to 10 times, and of course things start shutting down. So I think that's one of the biggest things. Is I think to sum this up, so we can move on to the next question is, I'm not sure we all as a group can avoid supporting the worker, but if we make our jobs easier by ensuring that they're booting into a secure environment, whether that's because you're sending them a device or we're using some tool like an IGEL UD Pocket or a terminal and avoiding VPNs, at that point, it really limits what kind of support we need to provide that worker that would be unusual, right? That's not something that's typical that we would do when they're in the office. When they're bringing their own PC, if you're not doing that, obviously you're open to a lot of these variables. And I think that's our feedback for this question. Matt, do you want to go to the next question?
Yeah, happy to. Here's one in regards to Microsoft Teams. Michael from JM Family. So what are people doing to optimize Teams video meetings via VDI? He also mentions what webcams have people found that work well with thin clients when users are working remote. Thin clients are at users' homes, he's asking. I'll just chime in real quick, Michael. So there's actually a thin client manufacturer, LG. People are probably familiar with their great high definition TVs and kitchen appliances. They actually make great thin clients, and they have a new all-in-one thin client with an integrated webcam. That's really cool. And the coolest thing about that LG thin client is you can put the IGEL OS on it, so you can reap the benefits of the IGEL management software. But I guess, Steve, did you want to kind of chime in there? So how are people optimizing Teams video meetings via VDI?
I actually think Robert's probably the best resource for that conversation. We found some very interesting use cases around compliance and how you can leverage webcams. There are very specific optimizations depending on the platform that you're using and depending on the endpoint that you're using. Robert, you want to chime in on that?
Sure. So, just to give a little history lesson. So, back with Skype for Business, and it's still actually probably still prominently in use. A lot of organizations, Citrix came out with a optimization tool, which basically takes it optimizes the video by taking it outside of the ICA channel and puts it in tandem with the session, and thus basically allowing the video to be latency free by redirecting it to the local machines. So that at the time required an additional agent on whatever endpoint you're using, whether it was Windows, Mac, or Linux. And then on the server end, it would be a add-on as well. And it would definitely improve the performance quite a bit. Since as Teams is rolling out and eventually replacing Skype for Business, Citrix has also rolled out natively, a ways to do a similar sort of redirection to improve the overall experience, especially when it comes to video based chats through Teams meetings. The benefit with the Teams portion is that already on the newer versions of the Citrix client, it's already built in, so you don't necessarily need to roll out an additional agent on the endpoints, and as well as on the infrastructure side, it's already built into the VDA as well. So it's really just policy based to kind of turn that on and make sure that it's optimized for the users. But it's definitely would help overall the user experience on that side of the house. Beyond Citrix, because I want to kind of cover any other scenarios if you guys aren't using Citrix. There are some third-party options out there that we have used in the past. Fabulous Tech is one that where if you were to redirect your webcams into the sessions, that can improve the overall experience as well. So there's other options out there, but if you want something that's all built in and it will work, to definitely make sure that your VDI sessions are optimized as possible when doing not just Teams meetings, but other kinds of video type software. There is a lot of ways that Citrix can kind of help on that front. And I'm not sure if anyone on the Citrix side wants to speak to this.
We also may want to, this is a good conversation for ControlUp and IGEL as well. I know IGEL's got very specific optimizations for different video platforms, because obviously this is key right now. And I think ControlUp plays an interesting play here too, because I'm sure most of you, if you're not optimizing it, you're noticing that you've got significant performance issues and you've got users complaining about their user experience being poor. And having visibility to understand what's actually causing that performance and what does it look like for an end user as they're using it, because often we get the complaints, we get a ticket opened up, but then we can't reproduce it. So being able to go back in time and actually take a look at what was happening for a session, that might be an interesting conversation for ControlUp to chime in, and of course IGEL as well, to talk about the different types of optimizations that are in the profile manager.
Kyle, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure, Barry. Thanks. So to you guys' point, right? This kind of came out of nowhere, and the optimization. So I mean, thanks to the Citrix and Microsoft working together on that, because in our latest release, right, to you guys' point, we do have some built in, right? So the Cisco is in there as well now. So these are the VDI optimizations. So there's the team, that directly correlates to the Citrix Workspace app, 2006. That optimization is in there in our 1104, the latest release there, as well as, like I've mentioned, is Cisco, and there's the others as well out there as Zoom. But the beauty with ours is those are the VDI optimizations, but within IGEL you can also do a custom partition. So any of those that have an actual full-blown Linux client, so for instance, Microsoft Teams has one and Zoom has one as well, you can actually use a custom partition and then run it locally on the IGEL. So that's another option you could have besides just in the VDI. So it kind of depends on the use case that you want. But yeah, either way, they absolutely help leverage the endpoint and, take that load out of the cloud/data center area. Barry, if you want to get on the monitoring piece of them.
Sure. Thanks, Kyle. So, one of the things I mentioned earlier, we do specialize in helping people monitor user experience. And obviously, when you're using something like Teams or Skype for Business or Zoom, which we're using for this webinar, obviously you want to track what that user experience is for all those different applications. So there's a number of ways we can help you. One metric that we have that we can track is called user input delay. It's a metric Microsoft's made available in Windows 10, the latest versions of Windows Server. And what it allows you to do is put a number on user experience in milliseconds. So, one of the most common help desk tickets that we see from our customers is they say Citrix is slow, but rarely is the problem actually Citrix. It's often network, it's IO, possibly on where their VM is running. It could be CPU. So we can actually track user input delay in milliseconds, and then you can build in triggers that get notified when a user input delay gets above a certain threshold. And if you know that there are common bottlenecks that are the problem, like there's not enough CPU available for the application, for instance, so maybe Zoom or Microsoft Teams needs more CPU in that session because while they're in there, they're also running the browser. You can actually, with our automated actions capability, there's things that you can do to deal with that. So one thing that you could do is give that process a higher priority automatically, or whatever the other bottleneck is. If it's the browser that's interfering, you could actually lower the process priority of the browser. So now with Control Up in play with your Citrix session, you can dynamically tune user experience with a combination of our user experience metrics and our ability with automated actions. So there are a number of things that we can do to help you with that, to identify first what the bottleneck is, and then how to automatically deal with that bottleneck in many cases.
Thank you, Barry. Hey, Kristen, what do you say we give away a prize?
I was just thinking the same thing.
Right.
So I did this old school. I'm pulling names out of a hat here. So our first winner is Robert not from Forthright.
Congratulations, Robert.
So you'll get a prize. I'll contact you after the event and get your information to get you your prize.
Cool. And we still have a couple more drawings to
We
go,
have
right?
2 more to go, yes.
All right, cool. Hey, some other questions that people submitted. Here's an engineering question for, this is gonna be a Robert Pate question from Angel from Norwegian Cruise Line. He's asking, how do you integrate on-prem Citrix with end-user cloud storage, like a OneDrive?
Sure. So it's a little bit of a loaded question. I mean, there is a lot of ways to kind of go through that process. I think it depends on how you want to leverage OneDrive and how you want to migrate the users over to it. And, you know, I can tell you based off, we've done several implementations of this and, you know, in several different kinds of use cases. Usually it's either to just provide access to users to get their OneDrive data, or even go as far as to redirect all their typical folder redirections into OneDrive directly. And obviously the goal is to leverage the entitled storage that the business invested in by going to Office 365. So generally in those scenarios, you know, there's a few things to consider. Usually one of the bigger ones is, you know, whether or not the environment is non-persistent, because that can throw in a little bit additional complexity. Mainly because, you know, and most Citrix environments are non-persistent, so I'll kind of focus more on that scenario. But generally, the big feature you want to make sure you're able to leverage is the files on demand feature, which OneDrive will support. And what that does is, as the users, you know, when they are opening files that are sitting in their OneDrive in their session, that the data is being cached to their basically to their profile or to the local machine that they're on. And then when they close out of it, and depending on how your policy rules are set up, it can then offload the data back to OneDrive and stay online only. And the reason that's a big thing is because the whole reason of most reasons to go to OneDrive is to kind of offload a lot of the data from on-prem onto the cloud only. But if everyone's caching all their data all the time, you know, meaning that the files on demand is not turned on, then that can become an issue in terms of storage. If you're on like PVS, it could be an issue in terms of write-cast usage because of the profiles going against it. You know, you definitely want to leverage a appropriate profile solution, which we've been very successful with leveraging FSLogix on that. Another thing you got to think about is compatibility. Generally, if you are in a Windows 10 or Server 2019 OS that will support the on-demand feature, Server 2016 or Windows 7 will not. So you won't be able to leverage that feature. So it's definitely something to consider when making the decision to use OneDrive. You also got to make sure you have the appropriate client version installed as well. There is two install types of OneDrive client. One is the user-based and the other one is the machine-based. And generally for non-persistent, again, focusing on that, you're going to want a machine-based install of that as well. So there is usually, and there's no one size fits all. There's always different ways to deploy this, and so those are some of the things that I've seen mostly in the field. But if there is a consideration about going this route, we at Forthright can definitely help with kind of setting action plans, like what considerations you may want to have going that route.
Hey, Robert, what are some of the typical things that you see with this with clients? Because obviously it works a little different than a local drive because it has to replicate to the cloud. So from an end user experience perspective, setting expectations are really important. Is there some advice that you'd give when leveraging something like this?
Well, if they are going to go the route of redirecting, in terms of the user experience, the users shouldn't really notice much difference. I mean, they will see, it'll basically behave the same way as you using OneDrive on your local machine. You'll see for every file, let's say their desktop and their documents are redirected directly into OneDrive. When they log in, the redirection will be set. They'll see the files, but the files are technically just headers, until they actually open the file. When they open the file, it instantly caches onto their session so they can open it up, stay cached until whatever policy rule you have will eventually push it back to online only. So, but for the most part, users won't actually experience much of a delay. Maybe if they have an extremely large file that's sitting in their documents, for example, and they open that file up and it has to cache and it takes a little bit of time to cache. There may be a difference in experience on those scenarios, but you can always try to approach that certain ways through policy.
Thanks, Robert. Hey, a few people actually were asking about IGEL specifically. I know Celso asked about he'd like to see the IGEL platform with Citrix and ControlUp. Be a great platform combination for remote work use cases. And then someone is asking about, hey, how does IGEL make life easier for you? And then one individual, Dwayne from Navient, asks, how does IGEL compare to Dell 9.0? I guess, Kyle, I know you mentioned one of the big value propositions of IGEL is, their software allows you to repurpose any endpoint into an IGEL thin client. I mean, we have customers at Forthright. They have endpoints that are literally, they're over 12 years old, these old PCs. They loaded the IGEL OS on it, and they turned them into an IGEL thin client. I know you mentioned that, but if you wouldn't mind perhaps elaborating on how the IGEL management console makes life a lot easier, managing and updating the endpoints, and perhaps how IGEL compares to Dell.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's really, besides the conversion that you mentioned, right, the management, right, is really what a lot of the customers love because it's ease of use. Many may not know, I mean, IGEL's been around for over 20 plus years. So there's a lot of feature functionality in there. And you can automate a lot of it as well, right? So it's if you conceptualize the same kind of thing you do in Active Directory with OUs and group policy, it's the same kind of concept, right? You would create a directory structure on devices, and then you assign profiles to those devices, right? And then anytime one of the IGEL drop into that folder, it will assume those settings and then be configured based on whatever those settings are that are inherited or directly assigned to those directories. So whether as I mentioned, whether it's a work from home use case, and they come through the IGEL Cloud Gateway, which securely, handles that configuration into our UMS, which is the Unified Management Suite. And those two can either be in the cloud or, in a data center, either way. So you can manage, whether, like I said, in the work from home case or whether it's still, on the corporate LAN. Either way, you manage them all centrally through the same location. And if you had to, in a pinch, outside the management console, you could as well manage the devices locally, if need be, just as a backup plan. But yeah, the management piece is really, for the most part, as well as the conversion piece, are the real two unique, plays for the IGEL. In regard to, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I was going to jump in real quick and make a comment about that many of our customers love the fact that you can have these devices shipped directly where you need them. And the initial process to sign into the cloud management portal is very simple. And then because the configuration gets pushed down to the device, it means you don't need to bring these devices into your IT shop, program them all, and then reship them. You literally can ship them directly to where you need them and have a very simple and quick setup where everything's managed from the back end. That's one of the things that we've really enjoyed, especially from a work from home perspective, because if you've got to send these out, you're no longer sending them to a branch location per se. Now you've got you're sending them to people's homes potentially. And the setup is so simple and managed remotely, where now you can take someone who's non-technical, send them this device, and be up and running in minutes. And I just want to throw out that personal experience that we've had.
And if I could add, if you have Control Up, you can actually monitor your IGEL devices, not only the Citrix sessions on the IGEL devices, but the IGEL endpoints as well. And we actually have the ability to take action on those devices as well with our API integration with UMS.
And that's really important because we don't get to control the end user environment. So we don't control the network that's out there. But with Control Up, we now have visibility to understand a lot of things that are happening on that terminal, which is sitting in a foreign environment, right? Normally we control everything from an IT perspective, and we understand when you bring your machines into one of our branch locations, we've got visibility. But when people are working from home, you are limited on what you can see without additional tools. So that's a great point.
Hey, Kristen.
Yeah, and to add, hold on. Yeah, and to add on, right, to the simplicity that Steve mentioned, right? So there is a one-time password, right? So it's it's almost a zero-touch deployment. So that the password exists, right? So that you don't have a rogue device, that you're managing somebody else's. But to Barry's point as well, with the Control Up on the monitoring piece, you can also shadow these the IGEL devices from the UMS. So whether it's if you see something wrong, besides taking action, right, you could actually, through the management, you could also shadow the device itself, not just necessarily the session, but you could get on the the console of the actual device of the user that may be at home, and help them in that regard as well.
Kyle, thank you very much. Hey, Kristen, what do you say we give away another prize?
Sounds good. Let's see, our next prize goes to Angel.
Angel from Norwegian Cruise Line, congratulations.
So I'll be in contact with you to get your mailing information to get you the prize.
Congrats, Angel. Hey, a few people are asking questions around security. Speak about security. What kind of security trends are you seeing in the work from home environment? Best practices for keeping employees secured when accessing corporate resources remotely. I guess Steve and Robert, you want to answer that one to start?
Sure. How do I best secure and back up our systems? Well, I think obviously we've started leveraging a lot of different tools to facilitate work from home environments, cloud being no different. having things centralized helps, but now that we've got hybrid environments where we're leveraging cloud infrastructure as well as things on-prem, a lot of our conventional backup solutions really don't work all that well, or they're complicated, or they require siloed solutions. So we've leveraged products like Veeam and Haiku to be able to back up our entire client's environments across different platforms. We've leveraged Nutanix as well for their offline and nearline storage for something like this. Those are complicated conversations depending on how your configuration is set up. I definitely think that COVID has accelerated the use of cloud and now added additional use cases, because at the end of the day, because we're no longer in our offices, and even if we are going in, we're trying to limit the exposure. Leveraging cloud means I don't need to provision equipment. I don't need to wait for it to come in. I don't have to go set it up in a data center somewhere. I don't need to get, order it from a vendor and get approval. When I'm leveraging cloud, I can turn things on literally the same day. And so that is a pro and con, because you do need to think about how you back up and protect your data differently. I think the other thing is that we want to protect our data from not leaving our control. And when people are working from home, obviously IGEL has and Citrix have very specific policies, and Robert can talk about this, that prevent the data from leaving the data center. And that means that the devices that your end users are using, even if it is their own laptop, we can prevent the data from being copied locally. We also can put watermarks on the back of screens. So if you try to take a picture of the data, for example, it's clear that you are violating some kind of compliant confidential agreement. And I started talking about this very briefly in the beginning, but there are solutions that actually will use the webcam and can detect who is sitting in front of the computer. So if you have, let's say, PHI data that you're trying to protect, from a healthcare perspective, the person that's using the computer is the one authorized, but we're all working from home, so it's not a secure environment. And you may be concerned about friends coming over to someone's house, or even other family members sitting down at the computer. And at the end of the day, how do you protect that data? There are technologies that we're using that will use the webcam using facial recognition to make sure that the person who is sitting in front of it is the authorized person. And if not, it'll actually shut down that application or deny access. It will detect if you pick up your cell phone and start taking a picture of the screen. And it can do a lot of other things too, by the way. It can take a look if your environment is too dark or not appropriate, because you can set certain parameters, or if someone, let's say, is eating in front of the computer and they are in a contact center, obviously that's not something that's ideal for customer service. So there's some very innovative technologies that we're being able to use that we didn't need when we all worked in an office, but work from home. I guess the trade-off is businesses are trying to understand what are you doing and how are you accessing the data. And so tracking all of that and understanding which applications you're using, who's accessing them, how often are you actually using them, are you actually working? There are technology solutions for all of those. Definitely reach out to Matt, because if any of you have questions about that, I don't think we have enough time. We could probably do a whole hour-long conversation on just that topic. But there are numerous technologies that are empowered by the partners that you see in front of you, along with some third-party products that sit on top of it, that definitely allow you to protect those remote work environments. Robert, I don't know if you wanted to add anything. I know you've got personal experience on configuring some of these settings that are, for example, baked directly into Citrix or IGEL as out-of-the-box capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit on that with a few of the things in terms of, like the redirections, blocking, and limiting what the users really don't need, whether it be USB devices, prize printers, the copy paste function, and maybe even set tiers on that. So maybe you only, say, for example, you only want executives to be able to redirect their drives in, but everybody else, you keep it off. Try to keep you know, try to have control on that, and don't just set it globally for, you know, for especially for users that may not need that sort of access into the environment. You know, and you kind of mentioned the watermark, you know, for scenarios where, you know, especially now where you got a lot of work from home users, and you know, you want to prevent a scenario where maybe they're doing a screenshot of some sensitive data. You know exactly, you know, how and when they took it. And then there's other options in terms of contextuals that you know, could be considered. You know, Citrix also has a tool called WEM, Workspace Environment Management, where you can set contextual rules around, you know, who, when, where, and how. You know, for example, you know, preventing certain users from doing certain tasks once they are in the environment, maybe limit certain tasks that can be done at certain times of the day, maybe looking and seeing where they're coming from or what device they're coming from, you know, and limit certain functions depending on where they're coming in from. Maybe even, you know, for an example, maybe only allowing users to connect to the environment if they're coming from an IGEL device only, just so that way you can lock down the IGEL, and then you know also that, you know, you're gonna limit on what they can do when they log in those scenarios. So I mean, a lot of these things can kind of help. And then on top of that, you know, leveraging the monitoring, and maybe Control could speak on in terms of from a security standpoint, but just getting a visibility to seeing what the users are doing, setting up the appropriate alerts when certain tasks or certain functions are being done that maybe not be authorized in the environment. You can get full grasp on that.
I want to add 2 comments to that before we go to the next question. And that's great feedback, Robert. One of them is these settings, these controls can also be put into place based on location. So you might have a different policy from a work from home person versus someone who's actually sitting in the office. Because obviously we do have some staff that are going into the office and maybe they still make the commute. Or you know, so it doesn't necessarily have to be a one-size-fits-all for the whole environment or for any individual. There are technologies that Citrix provides that is situational aware of what network you're on. Are you on a trusted device? And based on that, you can use smart access technologies to give more or less access depending on how you're feeling about the particular scenario. The other interesting thing is Citrix Analytics, which tracks what a user does as a typical day in the life. And for example, if I start downloading a lot of files at 2 o'clock in the morning, and that's not something that I typically do as a user, there's a Citrix security cloud service, and maybe Citrix can jump in and talk about what the current name is, because I know it's gone through different iterations, but it's highly intelligent, understanding behavior on a user by user basis and scoring that. And not only will that alert you, but you can actually shut down some of those processes and access if it detects that, hey, this is very unusual activity, and it seems like we're basically losing data. We're doing something that is creating a security risk. And take action on your behalf. I don't know if somebody else on the committee wants to comment on that specifically, because that is a very interesting feature set, especially now that so many people are working from home.
We actually only have time for one more question, and we have about 5 minutes left, so it has to be kind of a short one. But Matt, while you're figuring out the next question, I will give out the last prize. Okay, right. So let's see, the next person who's going to win a prize is, I hope I don't mispronounce this, but Srini Basan. So congratulations, I'll be in touch. And just before we finish the last question, if anyone has follow-up or their question wasn't answered during the session, everyone should have received an email from me with the subject line, 3 things you need to know about today's event. So please feel free to email me and I can forward it to the appropriate person on the panel to answer your question.
Yeah, actually, I have one for Barry in Control Up. There have been a few questions that were asked around monitoring, and I see a lot of the good number of attendees that joined today are some great architects and great engineers out there that manage Citrix environments. We love Citrix. We feel it's the best application delivery platform out there. With that said, they've done some great things and enhancements to their monitoring with Director and such. But ControlUp is one of the funnest products for me to demo, because when we show it to people and they haven't seen it before, they're like, wow, I had no idea we could get such visibility into that. So I guess, Barry, if you wouldn't mind kind of elaborating on some of the additional monitoring features in the the deep dive visibility you're able to get with ControlUp, just real quick.
Sure. So, we get this question a lot as people ask us, how is ControlUp different from other EUC monitoring tools? There's a lot of tools out there. So, there's 5 points I'll go over very briefly. So, number one is real-time versus historical data reporting. Most tools out there don't collect data very frequently, and there are a number of reasons, and there are legitimate reasons for that, but the challenge that you get with that is IT infrastructure metrics tend to have a lot of peaks and valleys, and they change very rapidly. So in our real-time console, we're collecting data every 3 seconds. So we're going to capture those peaks and valleys and to help you understand what's really happening in your environment, especially to catch those intermittent problems that if your tool is collecting data every 5 minutes, like a lot of tools are, you're going to capture those problems. And we actually have a video that we show that one of our tech marketing guys made when he was a customer that shows a solar system animation. In the middle, it's a frame every 3 seconds, like ControlUp collects data. On the left is every 60 seconds, the way some tools collect data. And on the right, it's every 300 seconds or 5 minutes. So you can really visually see the difference. So that's number one. Number two is guided troubleshooting versus figure it out. Most tools give you a lot of great reports, but they don't really tell you what to do next. And yes, it's sometimes obvious, but it's not always obvious, especially depending on who's looking at it. So we have our virtual expert that will guide you through remediation steps and what actions to take. And that's the third difference, is we have built-in actions at the host, the virtual machine, the session, and the process level. And it's a lot of actions. It's not just kill a process, but you can throttle a process, change process affinity, or change the process priority. And then that leads into the fourth difference, which is script actions. We allow you to import PowerShell and VB script into our console and invoke it on multiple objects and pass parameters. And we provide you a lot of script actions. So we have over 300 that are available. The great majority of those are Citrix focused or Windows focused. So it greatly expands your ability to both troubleshoot and remediate problems. And the last one is what I mentioned earlier. We can do automated actions. So we've always had the ability to alert you when a metric hits a threshold or a certain event ID comes up. And now we can actually take an action. So that action might be deeper troubleshooting, or that action might be, as I mentioned in my earlier example, actually fix the problem automatically. So those are what are the big difference things that you're going to get from using ControlUp when you look at other EUC monitoring tools.
Gotcha. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody again for attending. If you have any questions in the future, we're happy to talk to you about them further in detail with any of our partners on the phone here. Or listen, if you guys have any other question for some of our architects and engineers at Forthright, feel free to shoot them our way, whether it's a technology question, maybe it's a use case you have in mind, anything like that, we're happy to help. So thank you again. Hopefully everybody get their gift cards as well. Any issues with that, feel free to reach out to us. And we look forward to talking to you in the future. Kristen, anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to say thank you to Kyle from IGEL and Barry from ControlUp and John from Citrix, as well as the team at Forthright, Robert and Steve and Matt. Thank you so much for your time.